All right. Now recording and we can get started. I'm sorry, I totally forgot. All right, once again, one of my favorites, mostly as a reference, Mrs. Eastby's Book of Household Witchery. I do believe it is something I grabbed at like Barnes and Noble or something, some sort of bookstore like that, probably, and just like, oh, that looks interesting, and picked it up. And I used to be a pastry chef by trade. I don't do that for a job anymore, but I still enjoy doing that, and I enjoy cooking. And I don't do like magic with all my cooking, but sometimes it's useful to do that. And this has all kinds of things you find in the kitchen that are not usually in like herbal books. Like it will have herbs like chives and chamomile and stuff, but also chocolate, cheese, buckwheat, cabbage, butter, bread, broccoli. I mean, some of them kind of are, corn is in here, eggs. Some of them are kind of intuitive, like you can kind of guess things magic you can do with eggs, or butter or bread, especially a yeast bread. I have a cinnamon rolls recipe that I like to use for prosperity, because I like the idea of a rising yeast bread for prosperity because it's growing. But a lot of the money draw herbs and stuff are those sweet herbs like cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, cloves, and they just don't work really well in a hearty bread. I was like, okay, so softer bread. Thinking about it, I was like, oh, cinnamon rolls. Great idea. And then sugar to sweeten the pot. There's a lot of things that can go into that. It's just kind of fun. It's also where I discovered flaxseed is good for finding a job. This magic I have done a few times over the last few years. Molasses, mustard seed. There's also a few other things in here. She talks about doing other kinds of spells, doing things in the home. She talks about different sweeps and oils and things like that. But my main reference, this is mostly a reference book for me for food stuff, basically. So that's my first one. Would you guys have you can jump in with comments or questions or whatever.
I'm writing down questions as you're talking.
You can just jump in. Like this is not really presentation. This is more like roundtable chit chat discussion.
Well, I was really curious about flaxseed because I recently bought flaxseed, I think within the last maybe 6 months or so. And within the last 6 months, I got my new job. So I think I'm curious what attribute you might think flaxseed has. Is it productivity? Is it luck? Is it like what kind of do you feel you notice the attribute is?
It literally is new job. Like that's what I mean. It's one of the things they listed in here. I've used it for pretty much for job spells exclusively. Where did it go? I can't spell today. Welcome, Lee. I noticed you just joined. You're welcome to unmute, and it's very chit chat discussion centered. So, if you want to unmute and just jump in on things, that's fine. It says attributes. It says fertility, healing, new employment, peaceful home, prosperity and business, protection. Yeah, I've like the new employment is mostly what I've used it for. I have like a jar of it. A friend had some and I got some from him, and I have this little jar of it, and it's mostly full. It's been mostly full since I got it. I don't know what else to do with it other than like new employment work. So
it's really good in oatmeal.
There you go. I might try that because I have like
you can make like a flax seed, which kind of, or not flax seed, a flax egg, which kind of emulates the rising nature of an egg. So it's good in like oatmeal and bars and that kind of thing.
I have done the flax egg. I have the whole seed. Like it's a solid seed. It's not ground up like it is what I've done the flax egg, because I worked at Green Acres Market for like 4 years and had to do some vegan and vegetarian baking. So I've done that. All right, anyone want to go next? Or jump in with comments or questions or?
I just never really thought of cooking could be a spell to bring forth things into your life. That just puts a whole new idea into my head.
Oh yeah, you can use it's great. Cooking is great for spell work. Because it's especially when you make something, you're putting your energy into it.
Yeah, like any money. When you're talking about like job searching, can you do that kind of what you're talking about? Can you do that kind of thing for spell work and cooking to like attract like money? You want to draw in money to yourself?
Yeah, that's what I use the prosperity cinnamon rolls for. I mean,
okay.
because
You said
herbs for prosperity and money draw. A lot of them are those sweet herbs and
sweet herbs. Oh,
what goes like the cinnamon, the nutmeg, those kind of things you put in like desserts. A lot. There's other herbs that work for money draw that aren't those kind of things. But I mean, a yeasted bread rises, so it's a growing. It's really just really basic. It's I don't know. It's a really basic sympathetic magic thing where you want your money to grow, and the bread grow.
Right. Yeah.
Really simple part of that. But I mean, you don't have to go by what associations are in a book all the time either. Like if something makes sense to you, roll with it. It's gonna work because it makes sense to you.
Right. Yeah.
I have a chicken soup I make. That is something my mom made when I was a kid. It was my favorite chicken soup. It is like broccoli and corn and like little dumpling things called rivals, I guess. When I make it like a healing. I just put my energy into it for healing because it's chicken soup. I mean, that's a healing thing in general. So yeah,
I mean, so see, like if I wanted to focus on it's like drawing in money. There's recipes I make here at home. I'll make everything I have. I make everything from scratch. I don't buy any prepackaged meals anymore. And we chop up a lot of vegetables. We do a lot of things like that. But if I wanted to add some sweet herbs to those recipes, is that kind of what you're talking about?
No. I mean, I said the sweet herbs because I would Google money draw herbs for money draw. You'll probably come up with stuff that'll go with that. I mean, the ones I'm talking about I say sweet herbs because they're used in desserts.
Oh, okay.
Like cinnamon and nutmeg and allspice. And it's just you see those associations with those herbs everywhere. I put it with something that made sense for like a money growth thing.
Okay. Wow.
I apologize for my cat. He got in trouble earlier and now he's trying to make up for it.
Yeah, don't apologize for the cat. The cat is always okay.
Kitty.
Mine is chilling on my bed over there. So I don't have space for her to climb behind me, or else she probably would. But yeah, this book is cool because it has those references for things that I use and I generally have or can obtain pretty easily because it's grocery store stuff. And there's some other stuff in here that's useful. She talks about sweeps and oils and some ways to do. She kind of associates different deities with different parts of the house, which is something if you want to get into that, you can do something like that. And then and again, none of it's set in stone. It's not like this is how this is and that's it. It's like this is what I think it is, and it's generally how you should see any magical book anyway. But yeah, she talks about hearth deities and ways to do quick, um, some quicker ways to do simple altars and holidays. Quick holiday rituals, especially if you have kids.
What's the name of that book?
But the food thing was good. So
What
sorry.
was the name of that book again? Can you say the name of the book again?
Mrs. B's Guide to Household Witchery.
Ooh, nice.
Okay. Bees.
Lee, did you have a question?
Household witchery.
Lee, do you have something?
That one.
There we go. Hi.
Hi.
Mhm.
Okay. Who's next? Pick someone grab a book and tell us why you like it.
I've got a good segue book. Honoring Your Ancestors by Mallory Boideau. And this is not an inherently witchy or pagan book, but so many things that she addresses: ancestral veneration, folk practices, and some very interesting activities that come from Catholicism. Just right, I'm not surprised at all that Llewellyn picked this up and let her basically do what she wanted to do with it.
What was
And
her
she
last
does
name?
it. What?
How did you spell her last name?
Oh, Vaudoise.
Okay.
And she does it so well, talking about, most of it is ancestors, your ancestors, or how to deal with different ancestors if you're having issues connecting to yours. But she also goes into some epic detail about herbs that are very important in veneration. And speaking of prosperity, one of the examples she gives is like, you've got to do what you can do within your means, but you cannot replace one herb all the time with just a different herb. And in her example, she's talking about her Italian heritage, the difference between beans and mint for prosperity and sort of growth, because when her family experienced famine, you eat the beans. Whereas if you wanted to attract prosperity, you would use mint, which was, not sustaining, but definitely makes things taste better. And I just thought that was a really great way to sort of signify the difference between those purposes. And then she goes into further discussion about like spirits of the house that sort of you need to be in harmony with. Hearth spirits, but also like the fire and water spirits for your stove and sinks and pipes. That just blew my mind. I don't know why. I had never ever considered that sort of thing before. I was just thinking, oh, fire, clearly that's it. But hopefully most of us have running water in our house, and our lives would be significantly different if we did not have running water.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's true.
It's called Honoring Your Ancestors.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if that's flipped for you folks.
Nope, it's not.
Okay. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm making a list that I'm going to post in the
Mhm.
event so we know which books we've talked about.
Yes.
And what
And-
was the author?
Mallory Boideau, and I will spell that for you if you need it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Vaudoise.
Okay.
I'm always surprised to hear my name because it's not that common.
And she dedicates nearly a whole chapter on like the spiritual cleanliness of your house, which again, everyone is in different situations, but she boils it down to, if your house is a mess, you're going to struggle with some things, you know. If you can't take the time or deal with the physical kipple, maybe you have to deal with that first and see if that helps things out in your spiritual life. And pretty bold statement. That's one that's been on my mind for a while, because I know some people and their houses are just like, how do you live like this? I understand you have kids, but and then she has 2 chapters about channeling and mediumship. That's what she calls it. Sorry. How to just be a good medium and things you can do to work on that. This book was just quaint as can be, and I cannot recommend it enough.
Does she talk about ancestor altars at all?
She does, and I feel like I always leave that part out when I'm describing this to other people. The bulk of it is ancestors, how to deal with not knowing your ancestors, how to deal with problematic ancestors, how to work on some of the traumas of the past. But I feel like her other areas shine a little bit brighter to me.
I like that, because that's extremely useful with some of the social issues going on in our world right now, because we have some shitty ancestors sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Makes for a good Samhain book.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I can do another kind of segue-y one. This is a new book for me. I just got it and I just started reading it, so I don't really have a lot to say about it, and I haven't formed a full opinion on it yet. I do find it a little repetitive so far, but it's The House Witch, which is from a popular series. I think a lot of people know the one that's the Garden Witch one. What I like about this is that, preface, I'm an outlier among outliers. I don't actually practice witchcraft in any way, but I am very comfortable calling myself a pagan. My path is far more spiritual than it is practical. But what I like about this book is that she focuses on the spiritual aspects of what she calls hearthcraft, which I'm understanding as, you know, having several different names amongst several different social groups. It sounds very similar to slow living, which is something I'm super drawn to, because it's about how to access the present moment and make it sacred, in a way that, you know, like kind of how when you meditate, it kind of opens yourself up spiritually to the present moment, and to your breath. It's trying to apply common household, very home-based actions and make them into something that is somewhat holy. So like the act of making a cup of tea, or the act of drying a dish, or those kinds of things. And I've noticed that that's a really easy way for me to tap into my spiritual life, because I have a morning routine and it doesn't really change. You know, I try to get up super early. I come downstairs. I've started trying to light candles instead of just turning on a light, making a cup of tea, feeding the crying children, i.e. my cats. And, you know, trying to kind of extrapolate. I read for a significant amount of time if I can fit it in, trying to fit in those moments and not just do them, but encompass them, like encompass my entire awareness into the actions that I'm doing. So this is a really interesting perspective. It's The House Witch by Arin, Arin Murphy Hissock. So I think it's a fairly popular person.
Awesome. And if you guys don't all get all these names down, I will be posting a list. So I will be, if I can get the name down from everyone, I'll post a list in the event so you can access that. All right. Anyone else want to go? Have a favorite book? All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was doing my first degree studies, we had a whole bunch of reading we had to do, required reading and questions to the books that were assigned to us. But this was another book my teacher recommended me to read outside of the required reading.
Is that Dana D. Eilers?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Eilers. Yeah. And I read this book. I don't, she's a pagan attorney and activist, but she explains kind of how the law works, which she can get really technical with it. But I like how she describes in here is where we stand and what we believe in, as far as having the rights and everything. Because I think it's important to know where you stand, because she points out that I remember how she said it. Like when people are like being kicked out of their house, or they are losing their jobs, or their kids got taken away from them because they're pagan, or they practice witchcraft, which is still highly misunderstood in most areas. And I like this book because she points out the fact that she points out certain cases that she was in on, and people were getting their jobs were in danger, their custody was in danger, all those things. And they couldn't say things like witchcraft in court. They couldn't say the word pagan in court. They had to say Wicca. That's the one that stands up. Wicca is what everyone recognizes. That's what the government has,
It's
taken
legally
in.
recognized. It's
Yeah.
legally recognized as a religion, and the others, I
Yeah.
don't think I'm not sure exactly all the details behind that either, but yeah, which is odd that you can't say the other things.
I know, and that's the part that bothers me. And they were talking about people who were trying to start like nonprofit spiritual places for witches and pagans, for a place for them to go to. They couldn't get tax exemptions, because of the fact that they didn't use the word, they were using the word witch in their titles. They had to use the word Wicca, and she also talks about in here how people think it's this, devil worship thing. And that's another thing that I like this book, because it points out that these people are just following a religion like any other, basically. And she points out also the prisoners, people who are imprisoned between pagan, Jewish, Christian, and that the Christians get all their tools, all their books that they need, but then pagans are kind of they have to kind of fight for all their tools and all their books to get everything that they need while they're imprisoned. Even sometimes the Jewish people are being harassed at times, and I think this is an important book, so that if you're going to join the craft, know where you stand and know how to handle yourself on a legal level, and what you can take into the courtroom and what you can't, which I think is important, because I think people are loosening up. Finally, I think people are starting to accept outside religion, because I've been reading articles how witches and pagans and Wiccans are increasing in numbers in this country, which I think is awesome. And I think this is an important book to read, if you have a problem and you've been evicted, or you've had your kids taken away, this is the book to read, because she can tell you what you can do in here. Now, she did say a case in there that she was also talking about. This wasn't a pagan, it was a Jewish guy. He was working in a factory of some sort, and there was his manager there, and this manager hated Jewish people. So he starts strangling this guy. And I went like, what is wrong with this person? And this manager guy got away with it because they wouldn't recognize the fact his faith was not Christian. And they thought, since he didn't follow Christianity, that this guy got away with it totally. And the owners of the company didn't do anything about it. And so I think people need to be aware of things like this, because you could find yourself in a bad situation as a witch, calling yourself a witch, and people think you're a devil worshiper, you're following cults and all that. And I've tried to tell people it's really not cultish, it's occult. And there's a difference between cult and occult, and understand the differences in spelling. It's like with magic, MHIC and MHICK, and these are some just basic 101 things. And I think it's just important to know where you stand on a legal level, basically, as a witch.
I will say not everyone spells magic with a K in the pagan community. That's
Oh,
kind of that's not, it's not always done like that.
huh.
Really?
There's various spellings.
I've seen MIG, MAJ. I've seen that too.
Yeah, there's some weird ones. I think sometimes it's people just trying to be special, I think. But yeah, that's it's when
Yeah,
was
I've
that book
always-
published? Because do you know?
I've always thought of the K as differentiating it as something that you're really like trying to differentiate between something that is truly like fictional within like novels and writing and fantasy and that sort of thing, and the K being what we're trying to tap into in our own reality and the you know whatever that might be.
I think that's the idea behind the K, is that, and some people will differentiate between pulling a rabbit out of a hat in card tricks and, you know, actual like ritual magic. But it's used in some places. Some people use it, some people don't. Just don't be surprised if you see it just spelled like with a C.
Yeah.
Or other weird spellings, which again, sometimes it's just people trying to be special. Sometimes they have a reason for it. But do you know when that book was published?
Let's see.
Because I know that's I feel like that's less of an issue now than it was 20 years ago.
I know it's been a while.
And some of that stuff may have been may have been updated. It's probably still a good reference. I'm sure.
2003.
Okay, that sounds really accurate. Because
I think
I know
some things
some of the stuff
probably updated.
she probably talks about years some of those cases were too. Just someone go back to the 80s, I'm guessing.
80s and 90s, yep.
That was around the time there was that satanic panic and people were doing about things like that.
Everybody was scared about like satanic cults and like teenagers forming satanic cults, which of course none of it was true at any given point ever.
Yeah, it was all made up.
There are no proven satanic cults that ever made offerings of any live creature whatsoever.
Right. Kind of like all the QAnon stuff happening now. It's all false and fear mongering. It happens in cycles. Like the popularity of witchcraft happens in cycles too. People get bored, won't be as popular for a while, and then it'll come back. So, you know, while you can get the cool like shirts like this and stuff like that, while you can. It's a good thing. Like, so when it cycles out, you have the cool stuff you want, because you won't be able to find it when it cycles out until it cycles back in again. I've seen it. It's like 20-year cycles, because it was about 20 years ago I got into this, and that was about like when the craft came out. So and then it cycled out, and then it cycled back in. You know, that things go back.
How did any of you feel when you first entered the craft or paganism and it was first presented to you and you knew this was what you're supposed to be doing? How did you feel? Did you feel like scared at first? Did you feel excited? Anything like that? I felt everything when I first joined. I felt kind of spooked and excited at the same time. I kept going, what are people going to think of me now?
I mean, for me, I don't know. I kind of figured out that I was okay with the thing was I was really drawn to a lot of elements of the occult. I mean, I'm an Aquarius. It was inevitable. But I after college, after I moved to Los Angeles initially, I was getting really angry about the lack of culture. And that's just Los Angeles for one. But then for two, I had a really hard time identifying with what American culture was meant to be for me to associate with. And I was disenfranchised with, white American culture. I was like, I don't really want to feed this anymore. And that's when I started to expand to, Irish, Celtic, Britain, so forth, because that's where I'm from. I looked into ancestry. I remember I spent like an entire day on my mom's ancestry tree and just sourcing the very specific places that I felt, okay, I have a blood tie to these places. Let me research these cultures and how I feel like I tie to them. And it's led me down various paths, but I actually also wrap a lot of Eastern tradition into my spirituality as well. A lot of Buddhism. One of my books is the Tao Te Ching, like, that kind of thing. So I've tried to like develop it from a cultural perspective, but then also my moral perspective is very much Eastern. And it took a long time for me to be okay with definitions. I've never been the kind of person who likes to define things about myself. It feels too much like I'm pigeonholing or that I'm trying to fit into a mold. And I've noticed that I generally never truly fit into any mold. It's like what I said about the fact that I don't actually practice witchcraft. I wouldn't consider myself a witch, but I know it's almost synonymous with pagan groups, and I think that's a misconception. So I am very comfortable with the term pagan because of the umbrella term, nature of it, because it encompasses Buddhism, because it encompasses Taoism, and everything from Sikh and Hindu all the way to Druidry, right? Like it doesn't really pigeonhole me as much.
That's fair. I know well, to be fair, when I started, my interest was sparked as a young teenager when I saw The Craft in the mid-90s. Like very much, rebellious teenager crap. So but it took me a long time to directly tell my parents. If they hadn't figured out, my mom follows me on Pinterest. I'm witchy as all get out on there. I'm gonna try not to be a leader in the group and cuss. So but yeah, I have the witchiest Pinterest ever. And if my mom looks at that and doesn't realize, she is willfully blind. It took me a long time to literally tell them, but if they didn't know, they had to have some clue before that. My mom has known for a long time that I have not been interested in going to church with her anymore. She's very Catholic. But liberal Catholic, not like super conservative, because she still believes in science, because she works in medicine, and so does my dad. My dad. He's retired. But yeah. So liberal science, but Catholic. Dad's not religious at all. He was just like, "You're not doing anything weird, are you?" It's like,
depends on
no.
your
Define weird? Don't define weird. Just know. He's bought me books. It's a very dad thing to do. He's like, all right, whatever. He doesn't care. So I was, again, like my feelings about it when I started are very much influenced by being that the teenage rebellion. So it's hard to be like saying I was scared of it, because it was a little bit of a scary thing. But I really got more serious about it in college when I found other people, because I didn't know anyone else in a small town in Missouri. I go to Columbia. I'm like, oh, there's other people that do this. Okay, great. Teach me. So it's hard to judge that, because it was 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, more than 20 now. I started college in 2000, so more than 20. And I was, it was a teenage, there was some teenage rebellion rolled into that. That's hard to look back and be like, well, yeah, I was serious about that. Obviously, it's still a thing in my life now when I'm almost 40, but it was also, I can't judge if it was scary or exciting, because it was both. And it was also that there's that rebellion aspect that I loved about it. So it's
I
hard to
felt
do.
really relieved when I finally found something that I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like it felt more like more relieving than anything else. And my family is liberal enough that like my mom is judgy as all get out, but she's the kind of person who's like, as long as it makes you happy, honey. So it's fine.
That's fair. I hear that a lot of relief that it, like, oh, this makes sense. And it does make sense. And with the definitions and the labels, like mine have changed a lot over 20 plus years. I did start with Wicca partly because that's what was, especially at the time, that was extremely accessible to me.
It's the loudest.
I mean, with the books that were out at the time and the, just kind of how it goes. But, and I don't claim that anymore, but that is still a basis for a good chunk of my practice. And I'm always exploring more, and a lot of imposter syndrome, because I'm like, I don't know anything. I know more than a lot I think. But I feel like I don't know anything. It happens a lot because there's always more to learn. So.
Oh yeah, that's very true. Always something more to learn. When I first was introduced to it, my teacher, she was coming to my yoga class, and I was teaching a very, very beginner class for Ashtanga yoga. And we started talking about the craft, and she said, I'll bring you the handout that introduces you to our training program that we do for Witchcraft 101. Tells you the book list and all the subjects, and talks about initiation and dedication and all that. And I didn't take her serious at first, and then like 2 weeks later, she brought it in, and I about lost my breath. And then I got kind of like, oh my God, this is real. This is really happening, and I got real excited, but I got really nervous at the same time too. And I started thinking, about, the history, like the Inquisition, for example. And I thought, what are people going to think of me? But then I started getting into my head, I don't care anymore what people think anymore. This is what I need to be doing.
The history can be touchy because there was a time when they were publishing some bad history in a lot of witchcraft books.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something to watch out for, because people burned during the Inquisition weren't witches like we are today. Mm-hmm. They may have practiced things that we try to recreate, but they were not. They were Christian or Jewish. Oh. A lot of them were probably Jewish. They, that was also an anti-Semitic thing going on there too. But it's not the same thing. But yeah, there's a lot of those. Some of the early history stuff you need to be careful with, because I think they're trying to legitimize themselves with a tie to ancient times that's not necessarily realistic.
Romanticizing.
Yeah.
I think it swings both directions, though. I think right now there's as far as it swung the other way of trying to tie to an ancient thing, I think it swung the complete opposite direction. And now there's people that will say there's literally no history. And it's the same with like women's studies as well. I think that it's actually a middle ground. I can't go back to the people that were killed during the Inquisition and ask them or know them in a way that would tell me what their internal thoughts and stuff were. But for a while, I think I was listening to people that were saying that there had never been mother goddess figures ever. Well, there are mother goddess figures. Venus of Willendorf is one of them, an ancient one.
The oldest one that we know of.
Yeah.
But there were a whole bunch of little ones like that people carried around. That one's just famous because of where they found it and stuff. But yeah, so that religion was happening. But modernly it's sort of just that idea of you can't tie to any ancient religions, and they didn't really exist unless they,
I
it
think,
looks to me like it's just kind of swinging too far the other
I
direction.
think we can acknowledge, I think we can acknowledge that those ancient beliefs did exist, like, because there's a lot we have evidence for. We have archaeological evidence for a lot of ancient beliefs and practices.
Mhm.
But assuming matriarchal culture because of Venus of Willendorf is a jump. Kind of a
Assuming
big
what?
jump. Assuming that, I mean, there was it was most likely a goddess worship, but we don't know what they practiced at all.
That's
We
true.
can't connect our current practices to what they did. I think that's where we get that. And you know, the modern pagan movement, Wicca is 50, 70. I'm sorry. I'm still
No,
like
we still think it's year 2000.
Wicca still started in the 50s with Gerald Gardner, and that kind of kicked off the current pagan movement. There are influences, occult influences going back for, you know, further than that. And the romantics, like Thoreau, had some influence in a lot of that. So there's influences going back further, but there's not really a straight line back to pre-Christian times.
We had several hundred years of you know, practices being silenced, so to speak.
Yeah.
It was not able to be shared openly or recorded in any way. I actually put together like a historical list the other day of, like, you know, the break from, you know, the year 100 to 500, right? After or before when early Christianity was taking hold, right? And how since then and up to maybe about one or 200 years ago, maybe, it's generally been silenced by other religions. And that's not to say that there isn't history and that there isn't historical context and value between that time. But the disconnect is so stark between what actual ancient cultures practiced and believed and did, because none of them were not literate societies, but the societies that had writing. They were all oral.
They had writing, but they didn't. A lot of the peasants couldn't write. Is a part of it.
Yeah.
Like the people who could write were monks. And I think also that's what they wrote down, a lot of the mythologies. It's why they sometimes get probably a bit of a Christian bent to them, because there are monks writing down these mythologies. I think of Norse mythology
and ancient Celtic, everything was written by the Romans, right? Like, they did not have writing. They were all oral. That was the Druidic tradition, was to remember through oral tradition. And so a lot of like Welsh and Celtic mythologies were not written until the 1100s by yes, they were by Romans, but also around 1100 that was already by Saxons.
Yeah.
Cool.
And also Romans, like the early Romans going into Britain, also kind of had some judgmental writings on people they came across
through the lens of
you see those things, you have to look at them with the context. I mean, we have ancient spells. It's the PGM, and I'm just lost the actual like name of it. Greek magical papyri, that's it. They're ancient, they're literally ancient spells in there. Like, and there's ways to there's like something called the Blackthorn School, and they occasionally have a class about the Greek magical papyri. I haven't taken the class. I've had friends who take it. I have a friend who's a classicist and has studied these things, and we work together. So sometimes we'll do work with PGM stuff, and it's fascinating. Some of it's a little weird, but we have stuff that was stuff from then, but there's a lot of stuff lost too.
Yeah.
There are unbroken traditions out there, and they are usually not white. Most of European, actually the way I define pagan does not include any indigenous traditions or even Eastern traditions. It's kind of a gray area, I believe, under that umbrella, because they don't call themselves pagan for the most part. So, but yeah, like African traditions, generally unbroken. Like anything, they still have a lot of hoodoo and voodoo, and especially in Haiti. It's morphed and blended with Christianity, but it didn't stop. They kept doing stuff even when they were enslaved, and just added some Christian saint, like a veneer of a Catholic saint over the Loas, and it's you get into some South America, and it did blend with other things too. But yeah, like there are things that have unbroken traditions that go back thousands and thousands of years, but they're just nothing from Europe, basically.
So are you including, you're not including indigenous people in pagan, but you personally, but you're including African people as pagan?
No, I'm saying traditions in general. Indigenous traditions are also mostly unbroken. If they've been interrupted a little bit, but it's not a total break like white people have had. But it's so a lot of those get fuzzy because some of them can maybe fit into pagan, but a lot of them won't call themselves pagan. We could call ancient, it's people Kemetic are is the word for people who follow ancient Egyptian deities. And often they'll kind of fall under that pagan umbrella, and that's in Africa. But it's also, there's a lot of, that umbrella has some really fuzzy edges.
Yeah.
Basically. Most American Indigenous and Australian Aboriginal won't call themselves pagan, and I would generally not put them under the pagan umbrella. There are a lot of pagans that will be interested and look into those types of traditions. And I always say, be careful of words are leaving me today. I'm sorry.
I just wonder because I'm indigenous and I see myself as pagan.
I'm not saying that there can't be indigenous people who see themselves as pagan, but for the most part, as far as I know, for the most part, most of those traditions don't consider themselves to be pagan traditions. They're not highly involved in pagan community. Sometimes I wish they would be more, because it'd be interesting, but I think they've been appropriated from too much sometimes which is fair.
I just follow the definition that considers the term paganism not in regard to its etymology, but in regard to spiritual, cultural context, as any faith that does not fall under the, Abrahamic religions.
That's kind of how I looked at it. I mean, that's how I feel like it's a really big umbrella term, kind of. Yeah.
I find that incredible, like too vague. Like,
yeah,
Shinto people, I don't believe would consider themselves pagan. I would be very surprised if Buddhists considered themselves pagan.
Well, I'm a Buddhist. I consider myself pagan, but I mean, if you're talking about strictly an East Asian person, I think you'd have to ask somebody individually.
Because they don't have the context of the Abrahamic being the dominant religion in those areas. So to them, we're using a dichotomy that doesn't fit.
Yeah, I think it's that's why it gets fuzzy, because we do, like, you practice Buddhism as well as being pagan, and there are a lot of pagans who use Buddhist philosophies, research it, and sometimes practice it, or Shinto or anything like that. And it's more us being like, oh, I like that, let me use that, and less the whole group falling into it, I think. So there's some, because that's why there's kind of a lot of gray, fuzzy edges around that umbrella, because there's people that fit under it that use those kind of things that will call themselves something that other people that call themselves the same thing say, no, I'm not a pagan, that's not where I fall. So there's a cultural context too, I think, and so it's kind of hard to, so what makes it hard to define is that there's so many fuzzy areas. But more books.
More book.
Maybe not.
Okay. I've got a ye old bestseller. This is a non-Llewellyn copy of Wicca, Living Wicca, and the Complete Book of Incense, Oils, and Brews by Scott Cunningham.
Nice.
And, you know, Scott's not perfect. He does some things that I didn't notice at the time and I don't agree with now, like not citing some of his sources. He just randomly collects them and says, and he sort of gentles them a little bit in some cases. There are some well-known recipes or spells that are documented in other texts, and he specifically gentled them, probably at the behest of Llewellyn, because that's how he ate. You know, he lived Llewellyn to Llewellyn contract, essentially. But he was one of those loud voices that the company was like, you look professional, you know, if you know, keep the crazy down a little bit and we can make some money together. And I think that they did that, and his style of writing is just so friendly and enticing. Like I can just reread any of his old books and I'm like, gentle sigh, yes, you know, but so that's my take on that.
I think also he was he simplified things very well, and it was very non-threatening in the early 90s, which is, it was neat. Maybe that's what they needed at the time.
Yeah, because the country was coming out of the satanic panic.
Yeah.
And if you know, occult book companies wanted to stay in business, they had to make something that was very inviting and friendly. And that law book that was mentioned earlier, you know, that our country's got a lot of hangups.
Yes, we do.
So things like that are totally necessary and probably need updates every 2 to 3 years because things change. I mean, I remember when Bush and the VA were fighting, like, should this veteran have a Thor's hammer or a pentacle on their tombstone? And it was such like a big deal when they won. I was like, I mean, the VA sucks kind of anyway, but that was like the door opening just a little bit for other areas. And I can totally imagine the government has some kind of weird, strange law contract where you have to use the verbiage Wicca instead of something else.
That is so weird. It's so weird to me.
But I live in an area where I certainly don't want my employers knowing what is happening with me. And if people get in divorce fights that go bad, they will absolutely throw religion at each other like daggers.
Oh, wow.
Which sucks because these kids don't deserve that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Scott Cunningham is good. It's funny because it used to be with that go-to, what do I start with book that everyone says, oh, read Scott Cunningham, anything Scott Cunningham. And I don't say that anymore partly because of the age of it. And I'm, dubious of things that were coming out then that are like, maybe those aren't such good things to put in books anymore. It's like, maybe you should come to this with a little more perspective than being a beginner. But yeah, he's still very hugely influential on a lot of people in the community, and on some directions the community, pagan community, has taken since he published. Like, hugely influential. That's cool. You have a book with all three of those. It's funny they did that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was surprised, and I like it more because they're all there. I don't know, but I sort of have a 180 from that. Unless anybody else has something, I don't want to go.
You go ahead. Actually, I have a couple more too. So if you want to just do the opposite, we can. However you want to do this is fine.
I picked up 6 Ways recently by Aidan Wachter.
Oh, I want to read that one.
And you know, having taken the academic kind of coven approach for a long time, I was very interested in what this little book has to say. This is a comparatively tiny to some things out there. And he is very sort of like Scott Cunningham, down to earth, can explain things very well. And where he digresses is he's essentially like very chaos magic influence. Just do it. Just do it and see what happens. You know, there's not a lot of guidance. His chapters are maybe 3 or 4 pages each, and then he'll have a little bit about his experience. And he uses his own terms, and I can really appreciate that once I understand what they are. For a while, it's like, you're talking to a field? I don't understand. But he uses like the field to describe all non-visual entities and beings that you can interact with.
Oh.
And once you realize that, he just is slamming out these amazing ideas in such a short and in a short sentence and a very concise way. It's like, I have to reread that just to make sure that he's explained that so well. I mean, it was like, how did you do that in 3 sentences, man?
I like that because it's a sign of knowing it. I feel like it's a good way to show you that you know it well, and a sign of good writing.
Yes.
You can cut out all the extra and be extremely succinct.
Yeah.
That has been on my to buy list. I have too many to catch up on at the moment, but like, yeah, that's the one I've been wanting to get. I've heard good things about that. He's published something else recently too.
Yes. I'm gonna read that one after this one. So
Nice. Mallory, I think you're okay.
That was something that I was struggling with the House Witch book, is that she repeats the same concept over and over and over again in like every paragraph. And it kind of was telling me that she's still figuring it out herself. But I'm also not very far in yet. So I'm still willing to give it more of a chance.
And stuff like that too. Sometimes, you know, if you kind of read, you can, if it starts getting too repetitive, you can start skimming. But it might be good as a reference, especially if there's rituals in there or things you're like, oh, that's a good information. You may need to use that later. Kind of like that Kitchen Witch book. I haven't really done much reading all the way through it because I kind of flipped through it. I was like, I don't really need to do the reading for this stuff because I kind of know this stuff already. But this references is great. It's still, you know, it's a balance between that sometimes. All right, I'm going to go with a book I have read recently that I really love. It is Laura Sackroff's Weave the Liminal. Is this flipped for you guys, or can you see it directly?
I can't read the author, but Weave the Liminal.
It is flipped to where we can read it.
Okay. Laura Sackroff. This is not Wicca. This is, she calls it modern traditional witchcraft. And there's still, you can kind of see some like Wicca flavor in there sometimes, but I think that's in a lot of modern witches and pagans, just because it's kind of been such a beginning basis for everything for so long. But yeah, she talks about, mostly just talks about her practice. Her style of writing is very conversational, which I very much enjoy. like you can, catch a joke in there sometimes. I think she made like a Monty Python joke in one point. I just wrote in the margins, like, there's little things like that. Her writing style is very conversational, and easy to read. And this is very much about a perspective on creating your own kind of practice and your own kind of spirituality, and building your own from the ground up, and ways to share with others that enhances your own without tearing theirs down because it's not yours. Like, I don't know, I like it as a beginner book because it is not, this is how you cast a circle necessarily, although is that in here actually? I don't remember now. Underline a phrase in here: white dude privilege at work. Obviously, yeah, she goes into what is a witch, and I'm gonna write at the end here. Oh, grounded, practical, and creative. That's kind of a lot of what she goes into. I know I really like it, especially so a lot of it, like I said, I read it fairly recently. A lot of it is stuff I kind of knew and had experience with, but I also wanted to read it to know whether it was good to recommend, and I still got something from it. Like, and I like that she takes in some modern ideas. And I'm trying to remember. I'm not remembering specifics very well because they've left my brain by now. But yeah, this is one of my favorite, a favorite of mine. And one of the things she talks about, she calls it rights. Roots, inspiration, time, environment, and star. Roots are like where you come from, and ideas about. She also talks a little bit about ancestry is not just, and where you come from is not just blood ancestry. There's, and I've used this for a while, the concept of ancestors of body, mind, and soul. So like maybe feminist ancestors, or queer ancestors if you're involved in the queer community. If maybe baking ancestors, if I was still baking for a living, there's different ways, people who've done this thing before you. There it is. She says your DNA is not the be all and end all, but it is definitely a good place to start. It is a twofold consideration: what cultures are part of you and what family practices have been handed down. So like blood isn't necessarily, just because your ancestry goes back to a certain place doesn't mean you're necessarily like tied to that culture. That gets into some weird appropriation stuff sometimes if you're yeah, I don't know, it's just, she talks about building myths, and it's a really good book, especially, and I like it for recommending to beginners, and even more experienced people, because it's awesome. And obviously I really liked it. I like her writing and her artwork in general. She also has some artwork in here. Let me find a picture.
I know she just came out with an oracle deck recently.
Oh yes, I have that too. I love it. Like, there's one of her artworks. That.
I've got oh sorry, you have another one?
I can show you some of her oracle deck.
Oh.
It's a more simple one. Let's find a cool one. Right side up. Fake.
Oh.
It's really, here's a corvid.
Ooh.
Yeah, she has some cool work. So, okay,
All
I will
right.
let you go now.
I've got two children's books that I'd rather share. The first is The Complete Brambly Hedge by Jill Barklam. I love these. So I found the first story as like an individual book, like a thin one, at a tea room in Pasadena, California. And it was tucked in the very back corner amongst a ton of British teacups and saucers and crap. All these imported goods. The whole place was run by, a very old British man who wore a tuxedo every day and taught Meghan Markle how to serve tea. I loved the whole place. And I didn't know that it was, the book was called A Spring Story. So I made the assumption that there was also a fall, winter, and summer. And I was right, but I didn't know that there were also 4 more. And so The Complete has all 8. And because there are 8, they very easily and clearly align to the Sabbats. That is not to say that Jill Barklam was pagan in any respect. But what I love about these is that they highlight quintessentially English culture and holidays without making them religious, like without making them straight up, this is a Christian thing, or this is a pagan thing, or this is a Jewish thing, or anything like that. They are extremely secular, but in a way that is very nature focused. So like, for instance, she has a couple of poems that are part of the stories. Let me find the really good one.
It was
There
Jill
is
Barklam.
Barklem, Barklem.
Okay.
See if I can find it. That's the wrong one. There's a really good one for the one that I read at Yule time. Is extremely good. Not Winter Story. Here it is. So at the end, the whole thing is these 2 little mice are practicing for a play, for a reading that they're going to do for the whole community, for the neighborhood, as they get together for the longest night. And when they perform it at the end, it's called Midwinter. So they don't call it Christmas, they don't call it Yule, it's just Midwinter. And they say, when the days are the shortest, the nights are the coldest, the frost is the sharpest, and the year is the oldest. The sun is the weakest, the wind is the hardest, the snow is the deepest, the skies are the darkest. Then polish your whiskers and tidy your nest, and dress in your richest and finest and best. For winter has brought you the worst it can bring, and now it will give you the promise of spring. And like, all of her illustrations are these ridiculously beautiful things of mice living in trees.
That's amazing.
My favorite ones are the ones that, like, she draws the whole tree and like all the little nooks and crannies.
Cute.
So there's 8 unique stories that are all very seasonally focused. That's one. The other, I don't know if, and this will surprise anybody, but this has been all the rage in the last year, are The Lost Words by Robert McFarlane, illustrated by Jackie Morris. They also have, there's an album that goes with it that some really famous English and Scottish and Irish musicians put together that take some of the poems that are in this book, and also they wrote new ones. It is, you'll cry. You'll cry at the first song, you'll cry at the last song. Like, it's just one of those albums. But he is an incredible travel writer in the UK. He's gone and created the like dictionaries for words across different terrain, like big long appendices of like particularly Scottish words that describe like the cultural words that people use in their own communities to describe the landscape around them. And then he created the Lost Words. It's a set of poems. They're all have these beautiful illustrations. It's ridiculous. But there are all of these poems, and they're all from words that the Children's Webster Dictionary or Oxford Dictionary, it's for children's, they took them out. They removed them in place of more modern technological and industrial words. Things like conquer and bluebell and pretty much everything that's in this. He made a poem for every single one. Kingfisher, dandelion, what else is there? Heather, fern. Fern's a really short one, I like this one. Ferns first formed is furled, each frond fast as a fiddlehead, reach, roll, and unfold follows, fern flares. Now fern is fully flanned. See, I said it wrong because it's all a tongue twister. They're all meant for children and literature, and yeah, I highly recommend, and I highly recommend the album.
That's awesome. I like the folklore stuff because it's we don't have to have specifically witchcraft books. Like folklore is definitely part of that. Like, you know, a lot of our, you know, craft or practice or spirituality is informed by folklore. Those are awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Is The Witch's Shield by Christopher Penczak. This one I highly recommend. He has so much in here, it's not even funny. He has all the runes in here, all kinds of symbols. He talks about the Kabbalah, and he talks about protection in ways I never thought of, because like if you're trying to get yourself out of a situation where you are probably in some of physical, you might get into some kind of physical harm, you don't actually just disappear literally like they do on television. It's like where you would somehow magically, you're just out of harm's way. You might get moved to the side somehow, or you might be in a different location, but it happens. And I think that was a really interesting concept that you put in there. So that you're not noticed and you're out of the danger of the situation. And I thought it was really cool how he put that. And he talks about the different symbols you can use for protection, all the runes, tons of symbols in here. If I can find the page. Yeah, here it is. These different symbols he has in here for protection. And then he's got, I think, here, and then he's got rituals in here you can do for protection. And that also led me to where my teacher and I started, for protection, we started making charms out of hazelnuts and little beads. We put them on yarn and then we bless them. And you put them wherever you want to have that protection. And I have one in my car, protect my car. So all the crazy speeders today, but I have one on my altar, and I have one in my room, so that I feel protected in all places. And he also has an exorcism in here if you're really in a bind. I think he talks about how to protect yourself from people in a way where you are, I think it's got all the wording for this kind of thing. That's where you have like a picture or a model of this person, and you have to like put it, you bind it with string or something, you put it in like a bag and you have to freeze it or bury it. He talks about that in there as well, how to protect yourself from certain people. And one thing that I started learning was that if you're going to have someone come after you, it's usually someone you already know. Like, especially when you're in a relationship with someone and they break it off with you so suddenly and it's over. There's a lot of anger there on the person who wasn't ready for it to be over. So that person will be more likely to send something to that person. And it's just really amazing what people will do when they're mad at someone. So he gives different ways to protect yourself, protect your life, your home, your finances, so they can't affect you in any way at all. Because I think people will send you things you don't want, basically.
And they don't always mean to. It's not
Right.
necessarily on purpose.
Right.
It's always good to have some protection in general. I know I've added some more stuff recently, and it's always good to I have wards around my house, and I every once in a while to reset them. I charge them again, basically, just because it's generally a good thing to have.
Mm.
I haven't read Penzak's book on that. I read a Jason Miller book about magical protection. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
I have it on Kindle, so I didn't grab it because it's digital. Like I don't have it to grab. It was pretty good. Sometimes it's a little bit. It feels a little bit paranoid. Sometimes it's like, but if you're gonna read a book about protection, you got you got to come at it as like, this is if this is happening. I have an interesting counter to that. Let me grab one that's an interesting opposite to that. So go ahead, discuss.
I do have that Christopher Penczak book, but I have not read it yet.
Yeah, it comes with a CD of meditations as well. It'll take you to some protection meditations that you can follow. Come with the book. Actually, all his temple witchcraft books, like the inner temple, outer temple, shamanic temple witchcraft, all those come with CDs separately that guide you through the meditation exercises that are in the books as well. So he takes you through them.
This is one of those series that I haven't read many of them, but I've heard really, really good things about his books.
They're really great books. That's some serious reading.
Yeah.
Big time reading.
The Temples books are ones I've heard enough good things that I will recommend them to beginners still, because I'm like, I haven't read these, but I've heard really good stuff from people who know their shit. So
As far as protection is concerned and the symbols and everything, another if you want to read more about protection, is that Lori Cabot just released another book, and she's got a bunch of protection meditations in here as well. It just came out in the last year. She wrote that with her daughter Penny, and it doesn't really have any pictures in or anything. She just takes you through the meditations, and they go in different directions. And she's got a lot of them in here, and I highly recommend this one too. It just came out like within the year, and the thing that I thought was really cool, I ordered it from her website, and she signed it for me.
That's good.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
I got a lot of them will do that. I got the Liminal Spirits Oracle by Lauren Tempest Sakroff. I ordered that from her website, and I got it signed. Yeah. And I ordered a Byron Ballard book, and she signed it. And then she hand wrote my address on the package. Like, it's literally, it was her handwriting. I was like, that's just cute. It wasn't like she printed it off somewhere. It was just, I just thought it was cute, so I kept it for bookmark. So my opposite to yours is Dorothy Morrison, Utterly Wicked.
I have that one. Yeah.
It's a fun book. It's curses, hexes, and other unsavory notions. And a lot of it is, you can find protective stuff in here too, of course, and how to undo things that may have been done to you. It talks about how to make stuff like incenses and war water and van wash, and it's got a bit that kind of a hoodoo flair, but for thieves vinegar, how to make that and how to use it, various washes and powders. I think she probably has a hot foot powder in here. And she does talk about what hexes are and using stitchery for magic, which is a very, very old form of magic. Sewing magic. It's not magic, basically. And some kind of like really folk magic and how to make like a Barbie doll into a puppet. Like
Quick way to do it.
oh, where's I say I have a couple things bookmarked. What was I think it was bookmarked the Uncrossing Bath. Uncrossing baths are useful. There are some of them when you look up uncrossing baths, the one listed in here has lavender, rose, salt, bay, and lemon. There are also uncrossing baths that involve your own urine. Like, so you can get some weirdly stinky things when you look into that kind of stuff. So yeah. What else did she have? She's got some interesting stuff. Some things are harder. The liquid bluing or blue balls cracks me up for one thing, but I don't know where to find those. If I dug in enough, I could probably find it, but she's got a couple things that involve those, so it's probably like some of it's kind of a southern, there's a southern hoodoo flair to this that's fun. How to make a witch bottle, and this is the one that you pee in to be a distraction for stuff coming at you. Yeah, she has the magic that you use your pee and other bodily fluids sometimes.
I did not even know that existed. I picked up a book recently to sort of fill that niche of blood and bones. If I had heard about this book, I think I would have picked that one up instead. But
actually, I mean, this is fun. It's a slightly hoodoo vibe. I think she's a white woman talking about hoodoo, so I would also be like, that's probably that might be better. Who wrote that one by the way?
This is Kate Fruler. Freuler. Forward by Matt Oren.
I like him. I've heard very good things about Psychic Witch. I have not read it yet.
It reminds me of that scene from Zoolander where is it Will Ferrell? He's like, that's so hot right now. It's like Matt Oren is everywhere.
He is everywhere. I also follow him on a lot of social media, and there were times he was just like posting ads and stuff for his book all the time, and I'm like, or no, what was it? Oh, it was like it seemed like he had some sort of like program for posting on social media regularly. It was always his Pathos articles. It's like, I've read that one already. Like, why are you posting this again? And it's funny, I'll find like you can see when you follow some of these different people, especially on Twitter, I see it more than on Facebook, and they talk to each other. It's always amuses me because I'm like, I want to be in your friend group.
Oh, ow, ow, ow.
Yeah, that's my little addition here is the and it's very like there's one about with the one to do at work where like you have an annoying coworker, like get 2 bags of chips and you put one of the bags of chips under you and sit on it and crunch it so it'll kind of crunch away at them, and then you eat the other one to hide the sound of the crunching. That's hilarious. The toilet paper
chips.
Oh, that's a good one. Toilet paper banishing spell. And a friend of mine has mentioned this every once in a while. I'm like, oh, this is annoying. He's like, flush them. I'm like, oh, right. Right. The thing you want to get rid of. Like this has worked for me at a previous job with some coworkers that I did not like. I wrote their name on a piece of toilet paper. Like I was at a bakery, so I had like a marker with me. So I just, what bathroom, what the name on the toilet paper. I was like, I banished you from here, and I flushed them. I think we're gone shortly after that. I was like, yeah. Like the simplest way to get rid of something or someone, flush them, literally flush them. Like, that's awesome.
Is that one from Utterly Wicked? when you're just
No,
talking about?
well, she does mention in here. She mentions to write a full description of the bad habit on toilet paper, then use it to wipe yourself and flush it down the toilet. I wasn't gonna wipe myself with it because I'm like, I just wrote on this with a Sharpie. Like, no. But a friend of mine had mentioned it. I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
That's funny.
There's also stuff for the legal system. It can be useful sometimes, and you're like, all right, this thing's going wrong. How do I fix it? Or this person totally screwed over my friend, and they're a total asshole. Let's fuck with them. Fun sometimes. Empty wallet hex. Yeah. Erectile dysfunction hex. She's thought of everything. Yeah, there's also protective measures, and she has some good advice about like if you're gonna be doing this, this is what you need to think about. So, but yeah, it's a good reference book to have sometimes too. You have another one? Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, Witchcraft for Tomorrow by Doreen Valiente. She was initiated by Gardner back in the 50s, and I think she was the first one to ever read the Wiccan Read in public in 1964.
She wrote the Wiccan Read, actually.
She wrote it.
Yep.
Oh, okay. And
did a lot of the some of the best stuff that came out of Wicca is from Gardnerian Wicca came from Doreen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things she talks about in here in this book, she's got a great sense of humor. She really does. And she was real smiley because I saw her on YouTube. I found a YouTube video of her talking about different things. And she talks about sexuality in this book because my understanding, when you look at the Inquisition and the Puritans and all the oppression that went on there with sexuality, that she was making a statement in here how the church needs to apologize for sexual oppression that's put upon the world. And I kind of wonder what that sounds like to you guys. I mean, does that sound like anything that would be even possible to happen?
I think it's not one Christian church anymore. It's too many different ones for that to actually happen. I mean, the Pope might come out and say something at some point. This one has made some strides.
Like, we got a cool Pope.
Yeah, we got a cool Pope. But it's still when there's too many different factions of Christianity that are far too different. But that book has some is good for some like background of the modern pagan movement. I read that. I've read that one. I have that one as well. I don't know if it's still in print. It may be hard to find if you want to go look for it, but it is a good one to read.
I do know half her books are out of print, and you can get used copies for like $100 online, but
Right.
Never understood that, but I do recommend that. I highly recommend this one. Totally. She's got also a great sense of humor.
It kind of looks like the rebel symbol from Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
It does, yeah. It's funny.
I'm gonna grab that now. I gotta look at that. Hang
on. So you guys like documentaries besides just books? Documentary films?
I don't know of very many that are, within the realm of topic, but other than Ancient Aliens, I've watched a lot of Ancient Aliens.
Oh yeah. Ancient Aliens. Yeah, I recently started watching that one when I got that streaming service put in. Because one thing I wanted to show was these aren't books, but these are DVDs. These are like documentary films. This is a triple documentary. Whoops.
It's a lot of glare.
Yeah, it's called Women in Spirituality, the Goddess Trilogy. This is on the history of goddess worship, as well as the Spanish Inquisition. and it's part 1 is Goddess Remembered, part 2 is The Burning Times, part 3 is called Full Circle. It's a little under 3 hours, and Lorena McKenna does all the music, of course. And then my teacher showed me this one, History of the Celts. Yeah, it's a 6-part documentary. So I recommend if you want to learn more about the Celts and their and some of the pagan traditions, then that'd be a good one to watch also. So if I could just toss that out.
I do have another book, and I can go into one that I haven't read, but I know is a good recommendation. All right, this one I've read and flipped through and read bits and pieces of because it's also very referencey, textbooky type setup, with a lot of like these like little boxes for things and stuff like that. You know, it's called Pagan Christmas.
Oh, I like it. Pagan Christmas.
Yes, it is Plighted Spirits and Rituals at the Origin of Utah. It's an ethnobotany of Christmas, and it's just fascinating. I love Christmas. It was a big thing in my family growing up, and this is actually one my dad got me.
Who's the author again?
It is by Christian Reich. The A is with an umlaut, TSCH, and Claudia Mueller-Ebeling.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, look that one up.
But yeah, it's just some cool, fun information about Christmas and Yuletide, and talks about where different traditions come from, and there are actually a good amount of like where Santa came from, history of Santa, history of Christmas books out there, magic of Christmas, and like I want to get some more of them because I kind of love it. And it's always Christmas time when I'm like, oh, I want that. And then I'm like, no, I have money for some other things right now.
I was just listening to a podcast from the Druid Cast today. I don't know if it was this past Yule or if it was 2019 Yule, but he was talking to somebody about who lives on the Isle of Anglesey about the Welsh traditions of the Mary Lwyd, the horse. Yeah, and it was interesting because I was like, oh, do they talk about Calan Gaeaf in that book? I was wondering because I was just learning about it today. I just found it interesting.
Let me see if we have Mary Lwyd. I feel like that has become far more well-known recently, and I think it's mostly people sharing memes with what the fuck is this?
Yeah. Well, he was talking about how the Mari Lwyd has had like a really big resurgence in the last maybe 5 to 10 years as well, that a lot more people are participating, and it's getting a lot more commonplace amongst the Welsh population, and also New South Wales, Australia.
I don't see it in here in the index anyway. That's awesome. I do like it when people are like re-embracing these old traditions in ways, and especially when they do so in a way that's not exclusive of like other of.
Yeah, I like the idea of bringing back a communal secular ritual. I mean, it can be as non-secular. Oh wait, are you muted?
The last sound. Okay.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It's like I was talking and all of a sudden I saw you talking. I'm like, wait, where'd it go?
We both went silent, like I couldn't hear you.
Yeah. All right. The other one that I know, I haven't read it, and I think it's also it's a big book. It is thick.
Oh wow.
Drawing Down the Moon. Margaret Adler, I think, did it as a and there's resources in there too, so you can actually look up stuff. I think she did it as a anthropological study, so it makes it a different perspective. And it was done in like the 70s or 80s, I believe, so it's not necessarily modern, but it is a good resource for where we came from and where the movement has been in the past and the roots of the current movement.
I actually really enjoy reading books that are 30 plus years old now. For the last year, I've been trying to make my way through a book called The Medieval Panorama, which was actually written before World War II. It was between World War I and World War II. And it's really interesting to see the perspectives on medieval history from the perspective of history from almost 100 years ago now. So I think that there's something to be gleaned even from somebody's modern perspective that is now historical in and of itself.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, this is first copyright was 1979. So it's older, but it's, and she was studying what she was studying was different from what we do now. But it's still it's a classic, basically. It's one of those things, the classic. Actually, some friends of mine read it for their podcast, and I think it's the first couple episodes of their podcast. Their podcast is called The Witches Read, and it's on Spotify, and they read, classical pagan and occult books, pagan witchcraft and occult books. They've also gone into like the Necronomicon and Liber Null type stuff, but and basically review them, which is pretty great. Then usually about 2 episodes a book. So definitely recommend that podcast. They're fun to listen to.
What's it called?
I might be biased. It's called The Witches Read.
That's the podcast?
Yes.
Oh, is it Read spelled R-E-A-D?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. I was like, what?
And I will say they're both friends of mine, so I'm probably biased, but they amuses me to listen to it because they're funny. In my opinion. Again, I know them, so that probably makes a difference. You guys have any other books you want to pull up or drag in?
I got one other one.
Okay.
I actually wrote a book of my own called
Okay,
Go with a Spirit. It's about psychic development and paranormal investigations.
Awesome.
And it starts off when I was 5 years old and things progressed and dead people coming to me and all that. And then later, the second half of the book is about, some really haunted places that I investigated and was badly affected in everything. So I think two of my big experiences in there I talk about was we investigated a place where we picked up on a woman that died of tuberculosis, and I was the one she decided to jump that night. So I'm spending the whole night trying to breathe and feeling my chest on fire. So that was a bit scary. It took about 3 days to get that to break off. And then the other one was, that winery out there in Liberty with all the old buildings that are kind of run down. Yeah, I was in there twice. And we picked up on some really nasty black energy that was just all over one of the buildings. And I'm going like, this is created by people because this is what they want. This is what they want to see, And
I have a friend who just got engaged in that building.
Oh, really? Oh, no. Oh, no. Wow. They do have weddings there. One of the front building was fixed up so they can use that building for events and everything. But we're in one of the other buildings we were in. I was channeled by I think a military guy that was like real skinny, real sick. And I started to feel sick after that. And after we left that building, I told the guys I had to leave because I was about ready to pass out. So I had to go home. Once I got off the property, I was fine. Isn't that weird how that works? So if you really want something scary to investigate, that's the place to go. But yeah, it has lots of other really good cases that we did, investigations, and did you guys ever have, like, when you were like a child, did you have like any experiences like spirits coming to you, relatives that might have died, or animal spirits, anything like that?
My mom did. My mom foretold her uncle dying like within 5 minutes of the phone call coming.
Ooh.
No, I have more premonition-y stuff,
Mhm.
and nothing of any significance or use to my life. Well, I don't know. The other night, a few weeks ago, I was waking up, and I was waking up well before my alarm, middle of the night, and in my small waking, I was like, "Huh, I feel like one of my cats is gonna get up. Maybe they're gonna puke." And then within 30 seconds, one of my cats got up, left the bed, got down on my yoga mat, and proceeded to try to vomit all over my yoga mat. And I was fortunately conscious enough to wake up, get the cat onto the hardwood floor.
That's a
Oh,
good one.
That kind
wow.
of thing. That happens all the time. And a lot of dream premonition-y crap like that.
Wow.
At least he didn't
Wow.
puke on the bed.
Oh yeah, at least she got up off the bed to do it. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
It wasn't this one, it was the other one.
I would say that, most of my spirit involvement has been in the past 2 or 3 years, but even from a young age, my father always maintained that, your family spirits travel with you. And he, occasionally sees his parents who are both deceased in his dreams, and he'll do things like keep a glass of water by his bedside, not to drink, but because the water makes it easier for spirit contact to come through.
Mhm.
Um,
Wow.
so that's an interesting piece of my story. My parents are not of the same religion, so I never grew up thinking there was one right way, and anyone who ever told me there was, I'm like, you're full of shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it interesting. I grew up Episcopalian, and I mean, it's interesting because my mom's parents didn't go to church, but they were, of the 30s and 40s, and so they considered Christianity to be more of a social and cultural aspect of their lives. But my grandfather was shockingly similar to what I am now, very Buddhist, but was extremely involved in the Celtic music scene in Kansas City throughout the 70s. And in fact, my family has a lot of ties to a lot of people that still do a lot of like Heartland Celtic Festival stuff. And he passed away a few years ago, and I don't think my grandma really puts any stock into anything. But my mom grew up wanting to go to Bible studies and that kind of thing and attend church just of her own volition. And I think that she, like me, just wants to have spirituality in her life. And the Christian concept was just the most accessible to her. My dad grew up Episcopalian, and I think that was more of like a duty to my father, be a respectable person. But now if you talk to him, he's like, oh yeah, religion was a phase.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, okay, do you have any thoughts? And he's like, no. I'm like, all right.
My dad has never. He's gone to church with mom. Would go to church with us, like holidays, special events. And I grew up Catholic, and my mom is Catholic. Her whole family's Catholic. And it's very like white Protestantized Catholic. Like, because Catholics will kind of take on the flavor of where it's at, and in America, that's white Protestantism, which is extremely boring.
I mean, I know some Catholics that are pretty Catholic,
Yeah,
what I mean?
there are some, and I think the one that my mom, and again, small town outside of Kansas City, it's just it's kind of the flavor it took on too. She was from over by St. Louis, like Washington, Warrenton, and I think it's probably similar over there. I don't know. I didn't have a lot of like cultural Catholicism that I really, I learned about in other places. I'm like, oh, I feel like I missed out. But yeah, they're both very, fairly liberal, and science, very scientific and practical. And dad never cared about church. He doesn't. he went because mom, occasionally with mom, and mostly he usually didn't go on Sunday mornings. He'd stay home, take the dogs out, make coffee.
Yeah, we did Sunday
We're lucky he made
evenings.
breakfast.
We did Sunday evenings because we did the contemporary service. So my parents, yeah, and my brother, he's quite a bit older than me, were very involved with music within Episcopalian Church. I think that's probably the main mode of expression in my family of spiritual expression is through music. So I mean that's kind of the thing that's remained the constant. I mean, like, my mom did musical theater. My dad has always been in a band. My brother is a music producer. I don't do it professionally, but I like to sing. I'm dying to learn violin.
Oh, that would be fun.
And like I said, my grandpa, he played the bowrun in like a lot of different cultic bands throughout the 70s in Kansas City. And so it's kind of in the blood in that respect. And I don't necessarily think that, I think Christianity was a place to put it, but I don't think anybody in my family really, it's just the most well known to them. I think everybody in my family is more like we get fulfillment spiritually from so many different aspects, and mine is primarily nature based, which leads me to paganism. You know what I mean? Like naturally, as opposed to anything more concrete, because I don't think the universe is that concrete.
Yeah, I think my mom was the only one I was ever worried about telling. The Catholicism didn't stick with me or any of my siblings. Yeah, the youngest is into witchcraft now too. So I'm like, yeah, I knew you were a magical kid. You're just like me. 14-year age difference, though. Jeez. Yeah. But
my mom was a minister's daughter all her life, and she introduced my sister and I to church, but she never forced us to go. She never said, this is what you have to believe in. You believe what you want, kind of thing. So it kind of left the door open pretty much for us. But she knew the Bible pretty well, and we went to a Methodist church for a while when we were young. And then we tried another church that was Christian, a little more Orthodox. And I can't remember what they're called. It's that Tiffany Christian Church over there on Renner by the elementary school. And we decided to go there for a while. And it's interesting when you stop going to that church, the friends you made don't want to talk to you anymore. It's really interesting how that works. It's
I think to some degree though that's proximity. And there may be some prejudice involved with that. There is probably a little bit, but I moved to a different place, and I don't talk to the people I hung out with in the other place as much either. Like there's a proximity level to that as well.
I mean, the friends I grew up with are all still very Christian religious, and they talk to me. They don't seem to care. In fact, one of my very best friends from Los Angeles, she's like extremely Christian, and she, like we adore each other. It like is just not. It's like a non-issue, and it's interesting because I've got friends from some of the darkest forms of Christianity you could probably come up with. Ones that believe in brotherhood and don't speak to anybody outside of your particular branch of Christianity, who they're like, no, I like my friends.
Yeah, I try to keep an open mind, but I mean, if I move to a different town, it's easy to drift from people I hung out with all the time. Just
I do remember at this church, this Tiffany church, I was in grade school. My parents couldn't go one Sunday, and my grandmother and my sister and I went to the Sunday evening service, and they showed a film. Remember when the film put on the projector and they had to take the wheel off, put the other one on? It wasn't a DVD or anything. And it was basically about, oh, this was insane. Them showing a movie on people taking some mark of the beast on their hands, and that the military was out catching everybody to do this, you know, and they had a guillotine outside this church in the parking lot, and they were cutting people's heads off if you didn't take the mark of the beast. And I went like, what the heck are we watching here? You know, and my grandmother kept sitting there going like, this is a bunch of garbage, you know, this is crap, you
Go,
know.
Grandpa.
and and the thing is that the movie was over. The minister or priest, wherever he was, came up on the platform with his sad face and his money bags or bowls, you know, ready for the donations. He's got everyone all freaked out. And my sister disappears. She's in her early to mid-teens at the time. She's getting acquainted with some of the kids over there. She disappears. So this door opens to this back room, and she's in the corner, bawling her eyes out because they had her. These other teenage kids had her pinned up against the wall, putting their hands on her head, asking God to save her from the devil. And all this, they had her on the floor. And after that, my grandmother caught eye. She grabbed me by the hand, marched me down the hall, down the aisle towards the priest to go into that room. And he goes, "Madam, did you come up here to be saved?" And she goes, "No, I came here to get my grandchildren, and we're getting the hell out of here." And that was it. We said goodbye after that night. We never went back after that. And with the friends we made, didn't want to talk to us anymore.
Well, that makes sense. I don't think I want to talk to them either. Wow, that's crazy.
It is.
It's getting late for me. I'm gonna have to head out.
Yeah, it is closing time. So
Oh, it's 9:00. Okay.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Oh, bye.
Bye. Have a good night.